Welcome to Small Arm Solutions. Today we're looking at something rather interesting. This is the CMMG guard. CMMG guard is, you would look at it, you would expect this is just a standard 9mm carbine. Well, there's been some innovations done to this one which really make this one stand out above your standard 9mm carbine, and it revolves around the bolt mechanism. It utilizes a new system called Radial delayed blowback. And we're going to get into that in a few minutes. But first, we're just going to go over the basic, carbine, and then we're going to go into a very detailed review of the operating mechanism that goes into it. We have here, starting at the back, we have a Magpul CTR stock 6-position receiver extension. We have an upper receiver and a lower receiver, both manufactured from 7075 T6 aircraft grade aluminum. This is the handguard is manufactured by CMMG as well. It's the RK-M14. This particular one is in key mod, but is also available in M-Lock. You'll also notice this has like a burnt bronze finish. There are numerous different types of Cerakote finishes that are offered for this weapons platform. I think it's around 8 or 12. So you have a big variety of different kind of colors that you can go with as well. The barrel that we have on here is chrome moly vanadium, obviously 9mm caliber. We do have a muzzle brake on the end of this. This was a little bit loose, and we're going to get into that in a few minutes as to why that's loose. Now, getting into the lower receiver, your trigger is a standard mil-spec trigger. And you also notice we have a forward assist on here. Well, in a blowback, you would never use a forward assist, so this is not a hood ornament. This is actually utilized with the Radial delayed blowback mechanism, which you will see. You have a fire cartridge case deflector as well as the ejection port dust cover. You have a standard safety, standard bolt catch. Everything's the same. You'll notice that we're using here a Glock magazine. Now, this was designed, many of the ones you're seeing now, you're seeing people getting away from the Colt pattern, Uzi type magazines for the use of the Glock magazines, which is good because your average patrol officer is going to be carrying a Glock type pistol. And these days we're reverting back to the Model 17s or the 9mm. So the magazine that's in here right now is a Glock 18 33 shot magazine. This is Glock manufactured. Well, during the testing, we tried some different magazines as well. We had a standard Glock 17 magazine. We had the Magpul 17-round magazine. We had the ETS magazine. I also had the Magpul as well as Glock G19 magazines, and I also tried a Glock 26 magazine, if I recall. Now, the one thing that I noticed was, well, first off, every magazine functioned flawlessly. There was no problem. The issue was with the bolt hole open. Now, many manufacturers have had a lot of great difficulty with the Glock magazines and the AR-type rifles with the reliability of holding the bolt back in the last shot. This was no exception. I will say with the standard Glock magazines, most of the time it would lock open the last shot without issue. However, when it came to the Magpul and the ETS magazines, it was mostly not. Very rarely did it lock open the last shot. However, these were designed around Glock magazines. If you were to put a new production Glock magazine in it, you're not going to have any problems. The ones that I had the issues with were much older magazines, probably from the Gen 2, Gen 3 days. The current production magazines are made much better. It's more consistent for as far as it's the pressure on the follower to push up on the catch here. But they did an excellent job on that. So we're going to take a look in the inside. Now, this particular one has a Geissele in it. Most of the ones that it comes with, you have another model which gives you the standard mil-spec trigger mechanism. But this particular one here has the Geissele in it, which this trigger was excellent for as far as the accuracy of this carbine. And we want to take a close look in here. As we can see here, the bolt lock open mechanism, which has a tilting angle right here. So when the bolt locks open in the last shot, it lifts up on the lever. This lever in turn pushes upward on the bolt catch, locking it open. So this is a fairly unique way that it's been done in the past. It's probably one of the best ways I've seen so far for as far as it being done. It's very difficult to make these work with all magazines because for the most part, the way that the Glock pistol will open, the slide opens up and locks open is very different from the way that the bolt will work on one of these. So for as far as the amount of time that it has to get up there, for as far as the pressure that is applied to the follower, it's very different on the aftermarket magazines. So for the most part, if you use new Glock magazines, I don't see you ever having any problems with this thing locking open in the last shot. You use the older magazines, it's hit or miss. But for some reason, the Magpul and the ETS, they very, very rarely held open. And the buffer in here is pretty much a standard buffer. It's a standard weight buffer. What we're going to do now is we're going to get into the operating mechanism and which makes this thing so different. Traditional direct blowback designs is what you see here. This is about a 1 pound 8 ounce mechanism here, where you have the weight of the carrier and the weight of the buffer. Now you have a steel buffer here, very heavy, and you also have a very heavy bolt with a steel weight in the back. Now, how this works is when this fires, what happens is the weight of the recoil spring, the weight of the buffer, the heavy mass of the bolt delays the opening of the bolt until the bullet has left the barrel and the pressures have dropped enough to allow you to safely extract and eject the cartridge case. Now, this also gives you a very high rate of fire, and also when you start using suppressed, this stuff works really, really fast, and it gives you excessive amount of recoil, and the rifle will wear a lot more than a traditional gas-operated rifle. CMMG went with a radial delayed blowback. What that means is, first off, you're going to see some chamfers on the back of the locking lugs here. You're going to see a round cam pin, and you have your standard weight buffer. Well, this here weighs only 15 ounces. So by utilizing this locking mechanism, you are able to decrease significantly your weight of your overall system. So we're going to take a look at the inside of this. Again, we want to see these chamfers on the back of these lugs. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the inside here. See, we have a rounded cam pin. And when you pull out the bolt, as you can see, this is not your standard 5.56 millimeter bolt. You have no area in here for the gas rings, because there's no gas rings. But you see we have a fairly heavy spring on here. We have a standard type extractor, but this is a 9 millimeter extractor, even though it looks very similar to that of the 5.56. So basically how this works, I'll put this back together, is to make sure your extractor is on the right side. We're going to drop in our cam pin, drop in the firing pin. This thing is engaged, is in a locked position. So when the cartridge fires, it exerts pressure on the cartridge on the back of the breech. As the breech starts to move, the cam pin starts to move. And as that cam pin moves through that cam track, it gradually releases the radials from the radial lugs inside the barrel extension. What the system does is, as it goes through that unlocking process, that's the actual time that it takes to dwell or to allow the bolt to remain closed while the cartridge case is being contracting. So during the process of this opening, the bullet has left the barrel, pressures have dropped, and it allows the cartridge case more time to contract, so it's more easily extracted and ejected. What that does is give you a more reliable extraction. And the other thing that it does is also helps you out a little bit with suppression too. I noticed when I fired this thing suppressed, I wasn't getting nearly as much gas in my face as I was with the standard direct blowback. So what also this does to you is, by having less mass on both the bolt carrier and the buffer, that enables you to have a little less recoil, quicker follow-up shots. Now, traditionally in most these types of weapons and submachine guns, you do have the traditional delayed blowback. You do have, for instance, the roller delayed blowback of the MP5, but for the most part, you're seeing just a standard blowback. This is definitely a massive improvement, I think, over the standard delayed blowback. It gives you, again, less recoil, less reciprocating mass, easier follow-up shots. Any of you guys who've had experience shooting the 9mm type carbines, they have more recoil on them than the 5.56s do, and also the way that it hits you. This really alters the recoil and gives it a much easier recoil. Another very interesting aspect about this is the fact that we have adjustable weights. Now, we see in the back here, we have a hollow here, and you'll see that we have a roll pin that goes on the side here. What we do is we have 3 different weights that come in a separate pack, and what this enables you to do is, if you were to be firing plus P, plus P plus, plus P plus, or plus P suppressed, it enables you to add additional mass to the bolt carrier to assist you with having a proper function. Now, if you look at this heavy, which is a 3.5 ounce, this would be for suppressed plus P. If you look at this one here, this is a 2 ounce weight. This is for suppressor use or plus P. And you look at the smaller one here, this is light and recoil for standard loads. And all you do is you would drop this in the back, and then you would drive the pin in to the side here. Now, when you do this, for the most part, you want to you go with standard ammunition. Make sure you standardize, because this is not something you want to take in and out. This is not an easy pin to get in and out. So basically, once you choose your ammunition that you want to stay with, then you could adjust this. Now, the way this comes from the factory, this should work with everything. But going with this kit will make the gun that much more, the recoil even more manageable, and you also increase the length of the weapon by having the proper weight in there. Now, another thing about the Radial blowback system, it sort of opens up some new territory here. When you look at traditional calibers that are higher pressure, such as 357 SIG, 10mm, and 45, which we're going to get to 45 in a little bit, this gives you a whole new option to have higher pressure cartridges utilized in a system like this, where normally you have to have some kind of a locking or a gas system. This will enable you to have a lot more options for as far as what calibers you can put into a pistol-type carbine. Now, we did mention that we have a muzzle brake on here. The muzzle brake works very well, especially with the 9mm. Now, with a 16-inch barrel, it's a little overkill. Traditionally, I would say for a 9mm, your ideal barrel length is about 10.5 inches because all your propellant's burned up at that point. When you get into a longer barrel like this, believe it or not, the barrel, the bullet actually start to decelerate because all the propellant's already burned. So we decided to put a suppressor on this. So we just took that right off. And I dropped on my silencer co-octane 9. And we tried a few different kinds of ammunition with this. The first one I had was the SIG 147 grain subsonic. We also had a Magtech 147 grain subsonic, and I also had a Federal American Eagle 124 grain subsonic. And I have to say, pretty much mostly what you heard was the click of the bolt. Again, I wanted to stress the fact that I did notice a difference in gas coming back to the rear. I did not notice nearly as much on this as I do with my standard, like my Colt 9mm. It did make quite a bit of a difference. We have a 6.2 pound rifle here, which is relatively light. Now, there is also a pistol version of this as well, in both the 9mm and the 45. Now, the pistol version, I think, is probably a lot more ideal than this one, being able to have that smaller barrel. Again, it's more conducive to the 9mm cartridge. But for those of you who want to have the longer barrel, this is an excellent rifle. It is more expensive than most, but I would say it's comparable to what you would pay for, say, a Colt or something along those lines. So I think what we're going to do now is we're going to take this to the range and we're going to test it out. When you see the range footage, you're going to see that we did some accuracy shooting. It shot quite well. I shot it 50 yards with it. I decided to go a bit further than the 25, went to 50. We had some very nice targets. Probably the best 9mm targets I've ever shot was with this one, I have to say. Ammunition-wise, I do want to talk a little about the ammunition. For shooting without the suppressor, I use a significant amount of Black Hills 115 grain full metal jacket. And we worked flawlessly with everything I put in it. For suppressed, again, we tried some different ones, and we had no malfunctions of any sort. So everything I put in this thing, it shot reliably. So we're going to go right to that range footage. We're now going to do some suppressed shooting with the CMMG Guard 9mm. First ammunition we're going to use is going to be the American Eagle suppressed ammunition. This is going to be a Magpul magazine. Same ammunition with a Glock magazine. Got the Glock open in the last shot. Which this has been a problem with all these Glock lower receivers, is they're not consistent on holding the bolts open in the last shots. It has so far with all the Glock magazines it's worked properly, but the ETS it feeds properly, but it doesn't go back in the last shot. And this is the same Magtech and a Magpul magazine. Now, I expected this to shoot probably about 2 inches low here at 25 yards, going from supersonic to subsonic. So I expected that. Next ammunition is going to be the SIG 147 grain full metal jacket. First magazine is going to be a Magpul magazine. Now we're going to try a Glock magazine. The SIG ammunition, just by the felt recoil, is certainly the lightest load. Glock magazine. Last shot with no problem. It's an ETS magazine. Standard Glock magazine. Now the 9mm was an excellent rifle. We enjoyed shooting that. It was accurate. It was reliable. It was everything that it was supposed to be. We're going to take a look at another model now. And this was the model that really got this started, was the CMMG Guard in 45 Auto. Now, the story was a little interesting behind this one. They originally started off with this with a gas system. And there's a couple other companies that I'm not going to mention the names, but did the same thing. They were looking at using a gas system on the 45. And some of them decided to go with the blowback. With the blowback, you had a massive bolt, significantly heavier than the 9mm, and heavy buffer. So you had a lot of recoiling mass in there, so you had quite a bit of recoil. So they decided against going with the direct gas or going with a blowback, and they went with the Radial, which made all the difference in the world on the 45. Now, looking at the gun, the specifications are basically the exact same for as far as the barrel materials, the upper and lower receivers. The big difference is the bolt and the magazines. Now, the magazines that this comes with is your traditional Glock magazine, the Glock 21 magazine. Now, when I did my test firing with this one, I did use both a Glock 21 13-shot magazine and a Glock 30 10-shot magazine. I also had one of these SGM tactical magazines laying around, and this was a 24, I think this is a 26-round magazine. Don't quote me on it. I think it might be 26 rounds. And quite frankly, I had some problems with these with the pistol. I had some malfunctions with it, so I didn't really know what was going to happen with going in the carbine. But I'm happy to say that I loaded this magazine up several times, and I did not have one hitch for as far as malfunctions with it. The system on here, the radial delayed blowback, works the exact same way, just with a larger bolt. Unfortunately, I was not able to fire this one suppressed. My suppressor, I did not have a piston that would have gone onto here, so I'm very disappointed in that. I would have liked to have shot this thing suppressed. 45 is probably the most suppressed-friendly cartridge in the industry. So that was the only thing that I have to say I wish I would have been able to do. Now, ammunition-wise, a vast majority of this ammunition was the Black Hills 230 grain full metal jacket. We also did use some of the SIG 230 grain full metal jacket, as well as to see how the hollow points would work on this as well. We did try that in both of the 9mm and the 45, the SIG V-Crown jacketed hollow points, and I had a couple other ones I messed around with too. And no matter what I fed these things, they fired reliably. This one again was shot at 50 yards, and it was definitely reasonable. I didn't see any really reason in going up beyond 50 yards with it. The recoil was very nice. The last 45 I shot that was a semi-automatic carbine type was manufactured by Quarter Circle 10. Quarter Circle 10 was the last 45 that I shot. The gun was very accurate. It was very reliable, but I got to say there's a very big difference between the recoil between this and the Quarter Circle 10. The Quarter Circle 10 is a blowback. Again, you have the radial delay makes a major difference. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this one out to the range. We're going to put some rounds through this one as well. 100% reliable. It's impressive. We can still see that there's still innovation going on in the industry. It's nice to see that people are still looking outside of the box, looking at ways to improve. They're not sticking with the traditional way things have always been, like, again, staying with the standard delayed blowback. You know, seeing better ways to do it, better ways for these guns to work suppressed. I think a lot of the industry is working more toward making their weapons more compatible with suppressors, because suppressors are becoming a lot more popular. I know myself, I tend to use them quite a bit these days. And these particular things make these guns work that much better with the suppressors. It makes them last a lot longer. It also gives you a little more accuracy having a locked breech. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave me a comment. Please subscribe, and even better, share. Please consider making a contribution to our Patreon page. Thank you very much.